Hello everybody, this is Dr. Samuel Zinner in the mountain village of Aulla in Tuscany, Italy. Today I want to talk about ancient literature from the Hebrew Bible, the book of Lamentations in Hebrew Aulla. Right, I want to discuss and show you some overlooked divine names, encryptions, including the Tetragrammaton. Now some of these that I'll be showing you, scholarship is aware of them. Right? So there are some divine name encryptions in the book of Lamentations that's discussed in the literature. I'll go over those and then I'll show you some overlooked divine name encryptions that I've discovered in my own research, and I'll show you how they actually fit in with the previously known and discussed divine name encryptions. Now, I think very interestingly, we should look at first is Lamentations chapter 3, verse 33. Why is this important? Because this is the middle chapter, chapter 3. There are 5 chapters in Lamentations. The middle chapter is chapter 3. The middle verse, right, we could divide it in half, is verse 33 because there are 66 verses in chapter 3. So the middle chapter, the middle verse, the mathematical center, if you will, of the book of Lamentations is chapter 3, verse 33. And here we find a reverse, that is left to right, encryption of the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God, right, which traditional Jews do not pronounce. And they usually substitute it by saying Hashem or Adonai. All right, so here we see left to right, in reverse reading direction, an encryption. It's the last letter of these 4 words. Right? So we have Yod He Vav He. And so the Tetragrammaton is encrypted in the very middle of the book. Now, in the last 4 verses, right, so let's go to the last 4 verses of the book of Lamentations. Here in blue, right, you see an acrostic from the letters. So we abstract the first letters of these 4 last verses of the entire book of Lamentations, which are Aleph, Lamed, He, and Kaf, right, which is sort of a defective or incomplete spelling, right, for thy God, right? So because we would expect a yod in between the He and the Kaf. But as I've discovered, often the case, the missing letter is right there in sight. There it is. It's the yod that immediately follows the Kaf. Now, this thy God encryption, right, is discussed in the literature. Many scholars believe that it's intentional, it's not random. But what has been overlooked is what I have here in yellow. Starting at the bottom going up, right? So we could call this vertically reversed, right? So instead of starting at the top and going down, you have to start at the bottom and go up. You will see Yod, Vav, He, He, which are the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, just with a permutation, right? So a change in the sequence, right? So it's sort of a double encryption. Not only do you hide it in the form of what we call a mesostick, that is from letters that are somewhere in the middle of the verses rather than at the beginning or at the end, right? So an acrostic is when we have an encryption in the first letters of a line. A telestic is when we have an encryption in the final letters of a series of lines. But here we have a mesostick of the Tetragrammaton, just slightly changed, right, in the sequence of the letters. Now, right, so this permuted mesostick form of the Tetragrammaton is one of my discoveries that I've noticed. And if we go to the very beginning of the book of Lamentations, we'll see another overlooked discovery of mine. Here we have another reverse, bottom up, encrypted mesostick of the Tetragrammaton. Here, verse 4 going up. It's the last letter of each first word of each of these 4 verses. Yod, He, Vav, He. And just as we had two encryptions in the last four verses of Lamentations, we have two encryptions in the first four verses. Now the mesostick in chapter 4, the last four verses of the Tetragrammaton, right, is mirrored here by the same encrypted divine name. But here we have on the right in the blue letters the straightforward, if you want to call it that, right, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, letters 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Hebrew alphabet. So we have the beginning of the alphabetic acrostic, which goes through all 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. These are the first four opening verses. So you have the alphabetic acrostic pattern going from up to down, and then the mesostick encrypted tetragrammaton going bottom up. So the same looping pattern that you find in the last four verses of the book of Deuteronomy. So now let's take a larger view of this now. We have reversed encryptions of the Tetragrammaton in the first four verses of the book of Lamentations, in the final four verses of the book of Lamentations, and in the middle verse, chapter 3, verse 33, the very middle verse of Lamentations. And it also is a reverse encryption. It is horizontally reversed, left to right, whereas the two opening and two closing encrypted mesosticks, right, are involving a reverse vertical pattern, right? This is not the end of the story. Now we know also in the literature there's a horizontal encryption of Elohim, God, right, in Lamentations 2, verse 13. Right, and here one notices, this has not been pointed out in the literature, right, that the last letter of the word with the final encrypted letter there, right, takes the verse to letter 26, which is the numerical value of the Tetragrammaton. So if you start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and continue counting that way, when you get to the end of the Elohim encryption, you will find that it's letter 26 of verse 13 of the second chapters of Lamentations. Right, so that was previously known. Now, another previously overlooked encryption of the Tetragrammaton in the book of Lamentations, which I discovered. This is in the form of a telestick, and it's in the middle chapter again, very shortly before coming across verse 33, which is the very middle verse. So it's up to leaders. So what do we see here? It's a telestick, and it's so from bottom up. And it's what I call a permutation because it doubles the middle two letters of the Tetragrammaton. So here you have Yod, He, He, Vav, Vav, He, right? Four letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He. The middle letters are duplicated here. But notice the artistry in this. The first letter in this encryption is the Yod of Adonai, which is my Lord or the Lord, a traditional Tetragrammaton substitute. And the encryption culminates, the final letter in the encryption is the He of a straightforward Yod He Vav He. And notice it begins in verse 26, which is the numerical value of the Tetragrammaton, and it ends in verse 31, which is the numerical value of the short form of Elohim, El. And in fact, the only mention of El, God, in the book of Lamentations is shortly after this, in chapter 3, verse 41, which is 26 verses to the end of the chapter. All right, another, I guess, previously overlooked fact in the literature. And there are many, many other additional reasons which I'll not go into, which I have listed here. Several reasons to suspect intentionality in this encryption. Right, despite the fact that the letters of the Tetragrammaton are very common letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So we have to look for additional signs of intentionality as opposed to randomness. And there are abundance of those, but that's not the purpose of this presentation. I just want to point out these previously overlooked patterns. Now, finally, also overlooked has been this very interesting mesostick forward, that is top to bottom, of what looks like a form of the Tetragrammaton, slightly different here. All right, it's in the last four verses of the first chapter of Lamentations, verses 19 through 22. Again, a mesostick, Yod, He, Vav, Aleph, which would mean he is Yah, or Yah is he. All right, and you see here in the second line, see, O Lord. So the verb see, followed by straightforward tetragrammaton. Right? Now, in chapter 2, again in the verses 19, 20, 21, 22, in the final four verses of chapter 2, we have the identical mesostick encryption. Yod, He, Vav, Aleph. He is Yah, or Yah is he. And again, verse 19, as in chapter 1, so in chapter 2, it starts off with the verb see, or behold, and followed by straightforward tetragrammaton. All right, so those are the encryptions of the divine names I wanted to show you that I've discovered. There's a final one, not quite sure if it's intentional or not. The others, I believe there's strong signs of intentionality. This one I'm not sure. We have a difference between the ketiv and the kere, how it's read and then how it is said. In chapter 5, verse 3, right? So in the kere, we have a vav, right, that introduces the third part, right, the third word, which is imbricated in this possible encryption. So this is missing. This vav is not present in the ketiv, in the written text. So it doesn't work. But here, if we follow the kere, then we have Yod, He, Vav, Aleph. He is Yah, or Yah is he. So this one, not too sure if it's intentional or just random. But the others, there are many pieces of evidence for holding that they are intentional encryptions. And in a separate presentation, perhaps I'll present that evidence in detail. All right, so if you found this of interest, be sure to subscribe to the channel and support us through PayPal or Patreon. Thank you.